Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to our webinar on self-defense techniques in an active shooter situation. I really appreciate everyone joining us today. We are lucky to have our security expert Jonathan Sowell with us today, so I will be introducing him in just a few moments. Again, as a reminder, please enter any questions or concerns that you have in, and I will be answering any questions as we go. Other than that, we'll have some time at the end as well for questions too, so don't worry about that. I'm sure we'll be presenting a lot of information today. It'll probably be a lot to absorb, so feel free to ask questions along the way or at the end. To begin with, we're going to discuss the current problem, the current situation with active shooters. As if you've watched the news, obviously you recognize that these things are happening in a very steady pace, unfortunately this year, somewhat more than other years in the past. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We won't go too much into that. We'll talk more about the steps for prevention and some hands-on techniques that you can use for yourself or teach your family, your friends, your employees, things that you can do, really more focus on empowering you in an active shooter situation. So we want to focus on the positive today and give you some techniques and tools that you can use in the future. So I'm going to introduce you to Jonathan Sowell. I'm going to put him on webcam here so you can see his smiling face. Jonathan obviously has 12 years active duty as a Navy Search and Rescue Corpsman, 3 years law enforcement experience, and 12 years emergency medical service experience. And he's been training with us for about a year now, going out to corporations and to individuals and training on active shooter response and preparedness and situational awareness and all of the aspects that are involved in an active shooter situation. So he has a lot of experience. We didn't rely just on Jonathan's experience to create the content. We've used lots of different experts and resources with over 50 years of combined experiences. So Jonathan's going to incorporate his experience as well as many others to talk to you today about some self-defense techniques. So I will hand the floor over to him. And Jonathan?
Thank you. So how many mass shootings, this is 4 more victims, do you think have occurred this year in 2017? So we're in the month of June. Just use the chat window there and go ahead and put in what you think your answer would be. Give you a couple minutes to fill that out.
Any guess is good.
Any guess?
No wrong answer. Howard says 10. James says 4.
Okay.
Daisy says 150. Mario's 12. Tony says 126. Scott Madsen says between 10 and 20 in the U.S. Yep, we are talking about within the United States.
Yes, this is just in the United States.
And then Deborah says 7. We've got a good variety of numbers going from 4 all the way up to 150.
Good. All right. A couple of you guys are pretty close. 192 total. So this is this year in the United States. And you can look right here on the map. You can see there's a few different concentrations. In the Washington area, you can see 40 there. This is just the geographical area, not necessarily the state itself. There's 220 that's been killed so far and 758 injured, which is an extraordinary number. A lot of the times, what do you think the reason why you think it's so low? Because a couple people said that they thought it was 10, 20. Is there a reason why you thought it was so low?
Yeah, Deborah says not reported.
Yeah.
James says lack of media exposure.
Exactly.
Scott says I thought a lot more would have 2 or 3 hits. You don't hear about it. Focused on state, not reported on news. I do not recall hearing reports of this many.
Yeah. So a lot of times we don't hear of reports, and this is because media chooses to cover what they want to cover, which is going to boost their ratings and so forth and so on. But there's some really good resources out there. You can see all of the active shooters, all of the mass shootings in the United States, and you can see what happened, and you can read about it. So it's always a perplexing number when we see, some people often, they'll say 10, 20, 30, but it's because of media. They choose to, look at religious areas, political areas,
schools,
but oftentimes the smaller ones, or the ones that didn't make as big of an impact, doesn't get media coverage. And you can see in this map the spread of the mass shootings in the United States. So we want to talk about techniques for prevention. So I think the biggest thing, and what I've seen in my experience, is culture. Because you have to create a culture where people are safe, comfortable to talk about this stuff, comfortable to learn about this stuff. It's not the easiest subject to talk about. So when we're talking about culture, everything from written policies, your training, even screening people on the pre-hire. This is a huge one, because background checks and being thorough about your background checks. A lot of people will say, yeah, we put that check in the box, but they're not really thorough. They go through a third-party organization that, you know, does a good job with background checks, but maybe doesn't hit all of the different things you should look for. Risk assessments. This is another one that's huge, because looking at your organization and looking at access to your organization, where people can park, where people can come into the building, how many doors that are locked that should not be, or how many doors that are unlocked that should be locked, what's the lighting around the building. These are all things, and really, if I can drive anything home on this specific point, is culture. Every single thing I've talked about is culture, because when you're doing regular trainings and you have written policies, people become aware of what the culture is around the workplace and what they should report and what they feel comfortable with reporting and what they feel comfortable with talking about. And so when you create that culture, people feel more comfortable, and they're going to start opening up to the idea. And this is going to help you be safe and your organization stay safe. And the bottom line is, when in doubt, trust your instincts. Human nature. And there's a reason we've evolved in such a way, and your instincts play a huge part. So please trust your instincts. Now, precipitators, these are things that lead to violent acts. Now, I'm not necessarily talking in this case about just active shooters or mass shootings. This could be people getting in cars and running people over. This could be people bringing in knives. This is guns. This could be, you know, violent acts at home. So if you think about this and you look at this slide and you analyze the information, it's usually one or more. So what they're going to do is it's going to be more of a snowball effect. So one thing is going to build on another thing, which is going to build on another thing. So let's take a, we'll say we have John, he's 30. Not talking about myself, but just saying, John. So let's say he's having financial problems at home. So these financial problems are causing his work and his home balance to have a little bit of stress and strain. And so his wife is getting on to him that he's spending too much money on eBay, and he's not concentrating on the bills. Well, the bills start coming in, and these lead to financial problems, or legal problems, I should say. And if you think about that, that's three of them. You know, financial, legal, and domestic, right? And hostile conflict could be. So
Tony says always the one.
Yes. So if you look at this, you can almost do this for any situation. So when you start seeing these indicators building up, this is a potential violent act is imminent. So you just need to keep this in mind. Okay, especially in the workplace. So build a culture where people are okay with listening and understanding a few of these, and they can pull them out. Does any of this stand out for anyone that's attending the webinar today? Have you seen maybe one or two of these?
Or if I might interject, have you seen some of the news reports out there? For example, just recently, here in San Diego, there was a gentleman at work that had some outside issues going on, and he shot a coworker in the head. Yeah. That one won't show up in mass shootings because it was only one victim, but the employees were able to secure him, tie him up, and keep him there until the police came. But the point is that gentleman didn't just snap that day. There were other indicators that come out later. For example, the gentleman in San Diego, which unfortunately happens to be right down the street from us at an apartment complex, was sitting at the side of the pool while a birthday party was going on, had a gun stuck in his swimsuit, and they invited him to the party, and he shot, I believe it was 6 or 7 people. So it turns out later they talked to his bankruptcy lawyer, and his bankruptcy lawyer said that he was like a rubber band ready to snap. But he didn't snap. It took his girlfriend breaking up with him, some financial issues, some custody issues with his children. So it's not something that just happens all of a sudden. The UPS facility up in San Francisco, where the gentleman came in and shot 3 people. These 3 people were his friends. These weren't anyone that he was angry with. It wasn't someone that had done him wrong. It wasn't somebody that had fired him. He just had so many things going on. He felt like this was his way to go out. So, if you look at these, just because you have domestic problems doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be violent. But when you look back over the history of these incidents, people say, I didn't expect it from him, or he wasn't that kind of person. Well, it turns out that these things can have a completely devastating impact on someone's personality or someone's ability to make solid decisions. Obviously, it's not a normal decision to go in your workplace and shoot people.
No, and these build up over time. And often cases when you analyze most of the mass shootings and most of the active shooters in the United States, they find that it wasn't, just like you said, it wasn't that just a snapping point. It built up over time. And people had missed warning signs along the way.
Yeah. And Howard says, my biggest challenge is getting senior management to be willing to talk about this issue. They do not believe it can happen here. Yeah. It's totally true, Howard. I talk to people all the time. I even talk to clients who have had someone threaten an act of violence in the workplace, and they're still uncomfortable with presenting this information. But the difference here in what we're providing you is really more of prevention. I think a lot of employers don't want to talk about response because they feel like it's setting up a culture of fear as opposed to a culture of security. So if you change the way that you talk about this issue and talk about it as more of, this could happen to you in a movie theater, this could happen to you in a shopping mall. What you're doing is empowering your employees. You're not telling them that they're sitting in your building and, potentially liable to be in a situation like this. Exactly. And then James says, I've seen a myriad of these issues, but having investigated workers' comp claims for the city of LA for over 20 years, wow, that's a lot, James. Good for you. Many reasons also include employer-initiated behaviors, for example, favoritism, nepotism, unfair politics, and many other issues. Yeah, and we'll go into another slide on that next.
And sometimes that executive buy-in is the most important thing, because they have to display the same exact thing for everyone else to fall under their leadership and to understand, hey, this is the culture we want. And yeah, sometimes it's just tweaking the way you talk about it a little bit.
And then Tony says, you never know someone, which is totally true. You may not know that these things are going on for them personally. And she says her building is still not secure. It's too expensive. And that's true. A lot of employers don't want to talk about it because it reveals vulnerabilities that they need to implement within their organization. But the reality of this is you can put all the locks on the doors. You can, put in all these different levels of security. But if it's an employee, it's not necessarily going to change what happens one way or the other. So the reality of it is people need to be trained no matter what.
Exactly.
And no matter where they are.
Yeah.
Sorry, took over.
Yeah. No, and we think of security as layers of onions. The more layers you have to go through before you get to the employees, the better. What happens when it's the employee in that inside layer? Well, the protection really comes when you have multiple people and your organization knows how to respond. That's what's going to help you save lives. So unfortunately, there's too many things, too many ways to talk about. So here's some indicators of violence. So before we were talking about precipitators, what leads to a violent event? Well, these are indicators. So I'm not going to read off every single one of these, but look through the list. Anything stand out to you? Drug, alcohol problems, depression, withdrawal. These are huge, right? Violations of company policy, good one as well. People being a little bit paranoid. They're always looking over their shoulder. Now, some people can be paranoid and can be like have a little bit of paranoia, but this is somebody who's like, oh, everybody's against me. They're always talking about how they think, they're about to get fired, or they're the victim, or, Yeah, these are exactly
or just like
things
James says, things aren't fair.
Exactly.
Unfair politics, favoritism, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So these are things to look out for. Okay. Now, inside of the U.S., this is a breakdown of where active shooter incidences have happened, or the locations. So we have some in Commerce. Commerce makes up a huge part of this. Why? Because if you think about the locations where they happen, quite frequently, there's some things in common. They're open areas. They're large. There's a lot of targets. Less security. That's huge. Okay. So when you think about this and you see Commerce there, 45. Well, why Commerce? Easy access, right? Lots of people.
They work there at least 8 hours a day, every day.
Yeah, exactly. It's predictable. Schools, 17%. And sometimes schools just so happen to be that next largest building. So in some cases, and if you look at some of the cases that have happened throughout the last year, yeah, Sandy Hook, a couple other places, they were just the next largest public building from the site of where the shooter started. So in some cases, they murder their family, and then they go on to the next big public building. So 69% in less than 5 minutes. Now, what does this mean to you? This means that you have to have that culture, right? You have to be trained, because if they're 5 minutes or less, you think about the response time of police as well. Okay, so police can be, it depends on the area and depends on exactly what code goes out when they respond, but it could be anywhere between 5 minutes and it could be 15 minutes, and they have to mount at least 3 to 4 people to make entry. And every single law enforcement organization throughout the U.S. has changed their policy on this after Columbine. So after Columbine happened, they realized they couldn't take the approach where they just sit on the outside and wait. They had to go in and stop the shooter. So they have to have 3 to 4 people in order to do this. Okay, so 43% of incidents they cease before law enforcement arrives. Well, what does this mean to you? This means that you have to be prepared. You have to know how to fight back if you have to, or run or hide. So these are all important things we talk about. And obviously today we're going to get into the fight aspect, or a little bit of the fight aspect. I see 13% of these incidents end with an unarmed civilian taking down the assailant. This is huge. In some cases, it's been off-duty firefighters, off-duty police, but a lot of cases, it's unarmed civilians. So when we talk about responding to active shooter situations, we talk about the run, hide, fight method. Well, why do we talk about this? This was a method that was designed by Reddy Houston and later adopted by the FBI and DHS. Why? Because it's effective. Okay, so there's a reason why every organization out there who talks about active shooter talks about the run, hide, fight. So run. If you can safely get out of the building, get out of the building. Hide. If you can't run, it means you can't get out the door, you think the shooter's right out there, you need to hide. You need to barricade yourself in the room, turn off the lights, block yourself from view. And then if that does not work, you need to take action and fight back. So as a last resort, maybe the shooter's coming through the office that you're hiding in, you need to be prepared to fight back. So it's a continual process too. You have to think about that. So act full force. Don't hesitate. Hesitation is what gets a lot of people injured or killed. Okay, so you need to take whatever action is possible to disrupt or incapacitate the shooter.
Just a quick side question for everyone. Have you looked around your facility or your office space to see where a good place would be to be able to hide, to be able to secure yourself, lock yourself down, potentially barricade the door? Tony mentioned earlier, I was going to bring this up when it became the right time. I think this is the right time. She said, I believe that a lot of employers weigh the cost of loss of life to bringing office up to safety code, that the building isn't secure and it's too expensive to make the building secure. But and that is totally true. There are a lot of organizations that put off training, they put off all of this because they don't want to install cameras and they don't want to install new locks and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the list could go on and on. But the reality of it is there are a lot of ways, regardless of the facility that you're in, that you can lock yourself down, and things that you can do and precautions you can take. So Tony says yes. Already looked around for safe hiding places. Anybody else?
And think about this while you're responding. Even if your door doesn't have a lock, there's other ways to lock a door, right? You can wedge something underneath the door. If you have door stocks, you can wedge those underneath the door. You can take a belt, wrap around the door handle, wrap it to some other object. Or if you have those door closers at the very top, the ones that are whisper closers, if you will, they dampen the closing of the door. You can wrap a belt around that. And that's not going to stop somebody, but it's going to make it very, very hard for them to get in.
Tony says yes. James says absolutely. Daisy says not really. Everything is glass doors and makes it difficult to find a place where you can hide.
That could be.
So Daisy, are there any maybe copier rooms or anything that's not glass that you could potentially get to?
There has to be bathrooms.
Yeah, bathrooms are good places as well.
San Bernardino, there was 3 ladies huddled on the toilet.
Yeah.
Inside of one of the stalls.
That survived.
Mm-hmm.
Maria has a lock on her door and chair next to it to jam it. Very nice. Double duty there. Yeah. I also have objects that I can use to fight if needed. Yep, we'll get to that as well. Awesome. Good. Daisy says, yes, that's down the hall, the restrooms. Okay. So that's an option. Check and see if you can lock those bathroom doors. Some do, some don't. And then, let's see, Tony says things to throw if needed to distract for a second. Very good. Mario has documented ER plans. Very good.
Good. So let's talk about common weapons used. We're going to talk about the take action and fight, and this really incorporates the common weapons used in your self-defense techniques. Okay, so most people would think that shotguns and rifles would be a common weapon. Well, in some cases they're common. Rifles, 26%, right? But the reality is most untrained civilians, which a lot of times these are active shooters, are people who picked up a weapon for the first time sometimes, who don't have a lot of experience. A pistol is easier. It's less cumbersome. Now the rifle has more components to it. It has it's a little bit different feel, but pistols are also easily concealable, which is what they're after as well. So pistols make up the majority of weapons used, and the rifles coming in second. But you would think in some way that rifles and shotguns would take up the primary, because the amount of damage you can get from just a single round. So impromptu weapons that you might have lying around. Cold or hot coffee. I always have a water bottle with me. This has cold water in it. You can use the water itself. Plus, this water bottle is amazing too, because it's insulated and it's made out of metal. But you can throw cold or hot water or coffee on them as well. Fire extinguishers, probably our personal favorite. Why? Because they're 3-part. You have the spray. You have a 10 to 15 foot radius on the actual fire extinguisher chemicals, which could get in their eyes, affect their vision, which is one of the ways that you take down an active shooter. You can also use the blunt end of it or the bottom of it, and you can the business end yeah, and you can hit them in the face, or the body, or the head, the back of the head, or you can even use it as a smoke screen. So if you think you can't get close enough to the shooter, you're not within 10 to 15 feet, you can always tie something around the handle and let it go off, and use that to block your way to get to like a stairwell or a hallway. Pins are awesome. If you have them, you're within close proximity of the shooter. Just one jab in a certain area and it's fine. You have sports equipment. How many people are big sports fans? I know a lot of people who are sports fans, and executives who are sports fans, who have stuff in their offices all the time. I'm not
bats,
saying,
golf clubs.
Yeah, bats, golf clubs. And you see, bats and golf clubs are also serve another purpose besides just hitting in the head or hitting in the stomach. You can also disarm weapons with long objects like that. So some people will carry them in, and they're like, no, I don't want to do that with my signed autograph. But when it comes down to it, I think most people will choose to use it.
Real quick, James says, crack your coffee mug and use the sharp edges as a blade-like weapon.
Yes.
That's aggressive. I love it.
Yes.
And then Scott Madsen says, maybe scissors.
Scissors. Very good. Yeah. And when I first started working with Brandy and we started talking about some of the active shooter stuff, she herself had, I think it was a fruit knife or a letter opener in her desk. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she had trained everybody to kind of like know that it was there. But we have one of those cultures where we have fruit all the time around the office. So, I mean, it makes sense. Computer equipment. I think everybody, almost everyone who works nowadays has a computer or a monitor or even a cable, because you can use the cables for the doors themselves. But when we talk about impromptu weapons, computers are heavy. Even laptops, just throwing a laptop at somebody, just that quick second they're caught off guard and allows you to react and take them down. And then office chairs, office furniture, you can roll them right at the knees.
And then Maria says things to throw, staplers, tape dispensers, anything that's not tied down, absolutely.
Exactly. Anything that's not tied
down.
And the interesting thing about active shooters is oftentimes they're not trained. The majority of active shooters are not trained law enforcement, are not trained military, ex-military. So it's going to be a little bit easier to take them down.
And they don't expect people to fight back.
No, they don't. They expect everybody, just like a video game, to go in and run. And so that's why I'm hoping over the years that the number of people taking down active shooters grows. And it's the only way it's going to do that is by creating a culture where people are educated and not afraid to talk about these situations.
So two real quick from Lori, would you advise panic buttons within the office?
Oh,
great question.
I love panic buttons.
We do.
The thing about panic buttons is there's a couple different ways to take this, because some people will put them in there, they'll install them on the desks and a few different desks, but they don't tell anybody where they are. Only the people sitting there know about that panic button, which can be good and can be bad, because what if that person's out that day? And that was the way that the active shooter came in. And so nobody knew, where else that button was. But panic switches are amazing. You want to have them set up so that more than just 2 or 3 people know where they are, where they're located, and put them in a common area too. Put them in, having a panic switch hidden inside of like a lunch break room is amazing, right?
Any place where you can lock down.
Exactly.
Include a panic button.
And see, you want your panic button to bypass most security or alarm companies. You want it to go straight to the authorities. You want it to dial straight and have a pre-recorded message. And these, most people are worried about the cost of them. They can be expensive depending on who you go out and you have installed them. But for the most part, they're reasonable. And when you talk about that cost, the cost of human life will outweigh that every single time.
Lori says the cords, not just for the doors, etc., you can use them to choke someone out from behind.
Oh my gosh.
I love how aggressive you guys are. This is fantastic.
Awesome. It reminds me of like movies.
I know, right? Yeah. Somebody else has them down, and we'll show you some of the moves too. We can throw the cords in there. But Christina also says they have panic buttons and personal alarms. All staff have been signed off. I carry a personal alarm along with pepper spray. I think it's a very useful tool, whether I'm in a parking lot or in the office. It just lets people know that something is going on and it's not your typical, because you don't want to pull a fire alarm, right?
No. But the other day, it's kind of amazing you brought that up, because the other day I ordered something offline, and what came with it was a personal alarm.
Oh, that's funny.
It's called a sound grenade. So you pull the switch and it's really loud.
Yeah, mine's really
loud. And these are loud, and if anything else, they're going to get the attention of other people, and it's going to help more than anything.
James says some county jails use specific computer keys as panic buttons that send a message out to the network. Exactly.
So in some cases, it'll be like Control-Alt-F or Control-Alt-R. There'd be different little things, and you can your administrators, your IT administrators can help set this up. It's not a hard process. So everybody is aware that if they press this keyboard combination, it's going to send out an alert. Or you can even have stuff built into your computer.
Daisy said she lost audio. Daisy, if you log out and log back in, you should be okay. Is anybody else having trouble with audio? It looks okay on my end. It might be a network issue. Maybe just log in or log out and log back in.
So we're going to get into some things about active shooters, and we're going to talk a little bit about weapons. So guns are a distance weapon, okay? They're meant to hit targets that are further away from the shooter. So what this boils down to is being closer to the shooter is better. Now you're like, what? You want me to get closer to the gun, to the weapon? But it's true if you think about it. When the gun is inside like this, when the shooter has the gun in like this, they have more control. It's harder to move me right now, right? But when the weapon is out, like we're going to talk about here in a second, they have less control. So being closer to the shooter in most cases is the best idea. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, a lot of times you see, like in this picture, you can see the door switches and you can see the little dimmer for the lights. Being in that area when they come through the door is better. Why? Because they're going to be pointing, hopefully, across the room looking for other people. So when you're closer, you have a faster response time. You can take down and catch them off guard, which is amazing in active shooter. Because like we said, these are not trained people in most cases. So like I said before, their guns are a distance weapon. So if the gun is pointed out or fully extended, they have less control of this, okay? The reason why is here, it's easier to control my weapon, easier to control my arms, because my elbows are tucked, my shoulders are square, and I have a lot of power here. But the second that the weapon comes out like this, they have less control, okay? You can move this, you can push it up, you can push it down. Most cases I tell people to push the weapon up. Okay, push it away from the shooter, push it away from other people, okay? If you can control that weapon, you can stop the shooter, hands down. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to control the weapon. So one of my favorite ones is a redirection off balance. So you'll see here that in this picture, I was closer to the door when the shooter came in. So you wait for the shooter to open the door. You wait for them to take a few steps in. And as soon as they come in a few steps, you take your hand, the hand that's furthest away from the door, and you push the weapon up. And when you push the weapon up, you can either use your other shoulder and drive into their body, and you want to push the shooter backwards. So most of the time what I do, I'm really tall, so I don't really have this option for a lot of people, is you push the weapon up, and you can put your shoulder in. If you can't get your shoulder in, you can also take your hand and put it on the chest. Your goal is to drive the shooter back as far as possible. Now, what happens when you get pushed backwards? Anybody get, I was bullied a lot growing up, so I got pushed a lot, right? So when you think about that, you go back, 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 and you want to reach back. What happens when they reach back? One, you're controlling the weapon because you have your hand up there, but two, they're going to reach back because they're going to be off balance. The other thing that could happen, there's more than one thing that could happen in this case. You can push them into a wall. So when they get pushed into a wall, right, just like this picture, there's a wall behind the shooter. Push them in the wall. Your hand's on the gun. You can use your body to hold the person against the wall. And I would assume that more people, seeing that there's control of the shooter now, would come and help out and disarm the shooter. So this is the redirection off balance. Very good. You don't have to have anything to do that one. Now, a long object takedown, this is what I was talking about with baseball bats, golf clubs. You can even use like a wooden broom handle. What you do, you first, you wait for the shooter to come in a couple steps, okay? And you want to be by the door, but not so close to the door that as soon as he comes in, he sees you, okay? He or she. I say he a lot because 97% of the time it's males. So, or gentlemen who do this. I wouldn't say gentlemen. Anyways, so,
dudes.
But, dudes. Yeah. So step one, he comes in, about 2 steps in, you hit in the wrist. You use that long object to hit the assailant in the wrist. And what this is going to do is it's going to force their body forward. And it's also going to most likely disarm the shooter, okay? Because that wrist is a nice little gripping point. So if you ever hit the wrist, you'll notice that you lose a lot of your grip, okay? And most of the time, a shooter isn't going to have full 100% grip strength on that weapon. In order to shoot something and to shoot it accurately, you need about 30% of your grip strength. So what's going to happen is you're going to hit there, and then it's going to force the person forward, hopefully disarm the person. When they get forced forward, what you want to do is your next step is to hit them in the stomach or the back of the head. The back of the head is one of the most amazing parts, okay? So you hit the back of the head. At this point, they should lose consciousness. If not, the next step when they get on the ground, or step 3, is to continue hitting in the back of the head. So hit in the back of the head once and repeat until they stop moving. Now, another thing is when they're on the ground like this, if you could go back, the weapon is still in this case, this is me, but in this case, the weapon is still in my hand or close to my hand. You want to get this weapon away, okay? So your goal is to jump on top. And we'll show you a couple of pictures where there's other takedowns where we are on top and controlling the body. So you want to get that weapon away and you want to get on top and control the body. Okay, one-on-one takedown. So we just did the long object, yep. So we're going to do the one-on-one takedown. So this is a really great takedown. You notice that in step one here, I'm close to the frame, but I'm far enough back that when the gentleman comes in or the assailant comes in and the shooter comes in, he's not going to see me, okay? He's going to be caught off guard. So this is another thing. They're not expecting him to fight back, right? So another thing, catching him off guard. So when he comes in, I aim for the hips, somewhere between the hips and the knees. If you've noticed, your hips are a really great, they're a center point for your body. That's kind of where your balance is controlled. Besides your ears, which is where your balance is controlled in your body, your hips have a lot to do with your weight and displacement of weight. So what you do is you go between the hips and the knees, okay? And it's almost like a wrestling or a football move. You go for that area and you tackle it. Now, you want it to be, you don't want to do your inside shoulder, the shoulder that's further in the room. You want to go with the shoulder that's closer to the door. The reason why is we don't want to push them out the door, we want to push them in the door. And if there's multiple people inside the room, they can help out, right? So use that to take them down to the ground. And when I get it to the ground, I put one of my knees in his chest, maybe, or his hip if I can. The chest is a really great part because when your knee and pressure goes there, what else is there? Your lungs. So it makes it harder for him to breathe. So he's going to be more cooperative, so you'll put less pressure. The other thing is your hand, you want it to be up there near the weapon because you want to be able to control that weapon. Now at this point, I'm hoping that someone else in the room comes over and kicks the weapon away. Worst case scenario, I'm there by myself controlling this. 260 pounds is a lot on top of somebody, so it's not a big deal. And if you're saying, oh, I'm a little bit smaller, I'm more petite, that's fine. We've done drills where Brandy, she's much smaller than I am, and she has controlled me just because of the pressure. The pressure alone is huge. So when you get on somebody, you use your weight and you use it to your advantage. Okay. Now a 2-on-1 takedown is about the same. The difference here is that you have two people. One person is going to do the takedown and the other person is going to control the weapon in the hands as they get to the ground. So the steps are the same. The first person is really going to be by the door frame. The second person is going to line up just behind them. Okay? And you both want to be out of sight. Okay? So when the assailant comes in, again, about 2 steps in, you want to go for the hips. You want to hit between the hips and the knees, right in that femur area, right in that thigh area, and bring them down, okay?
Oh, this is wrong.
Yeah, and you'll see that the shoulder in step 2 is wrong. He's pointing the inside shoulder towards the door, which would actually push the person outside versus inside. So don't do that. But step 3, you see how the lady has her hands on the shooter's hands, okay? As soon as he came in, she put her hands there, and he's already kind of in the tackle, so she's just guiding it down to the ground away from people. And so when they do get on the ground, she has full weight on those hands. So even if he doesn't get knocked out, he's going to be caught off guard. 2, if she has his hands, he's not going to have anything to catch himself with. When you fall, what happens? You put your hands out, right? Well, if you don't have those hands to be able to put out, guess what happens? You hit harder, okay? So the assailant's going to hit harder on the ground. And so that's going to be more of a stun, right? So you take that time and use it to your advantage. So you have probably about 2 to 3 seconds, and that's enough time to get you pressure on those hands so you can control the weapon and you can get a knee on the chest. Now the person who took the shooter down needs to have pressure on the hips and on the legs, okay? And maybe somebody can come over and get that weapon out of the hands. Most likely, they're not going to have a good grip on that weapon at all. And then also, in this case, you can hog tie them or tie them up with some rope or whatever you have available, cords, computer cords.
And also, in this picture, which didn't occur to me before, actually, until we're sitting here looking at it, if the one person has their knee on their back or on their chest, depending on whether they're up or down. The person in the front, if they're struggling trying to keep control of that weapon, they could come over and put their knee on the wrist, and then there's no way that person's going to be able to hold on to that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I would do. I'd put one knee there. If you're still struggling, because this person might be strong, if you're still struggling, yeah, put a knee right there. And another one that's really good that most people don't think about is putting a knee right on the head. So right on the side of the head. I'll tell you what, if you want pain stops people from doing stuff, right? Right? You get a bad knee, you get pain in your knee, you stop wanting to walk around, right? Same thing. If I have a knee in your head, it's going to stop you from wanting to struggle because you're not going to want that pressure there. Okay?
So any questions? That's the last of our...
A great Bruce Lee quote here.
And this is all about muscle memory, right? So we always recommend that you practice these things with your coworkers. Again, it's all about awareness. It's all about a culture of safety. It's all about a culture of preparedness. Christina asked, other than CPI, are there other training programs that we should look into? I'm not familiar with CPI. Are you familiar with CPI? Christina, if you could tell me a little bit more about that. Obviously, we're a training organization, so I'll talk about what we can offer you. But there are there's a lot of really great information out there on the internet, from the DHS to the FBI. Again, a lot of it revolves around run, hide, fight, or response methods. And a lot of the self-defense stuff, the reason that we talk a lot about self-defense techniques is a lot of the stuff out there is like Krav Maga and this crazy stuff for you to disarm somebody if you're facing them and take someone's weapon. That's a little scary, and I don't know that I would train my employees to do anything like that. So that's not something that we typically recommend or tell someone to look at, but definitely if you look at Department of Homeland Security or FBI, you can find some good programs that are out there. There's a lot of e-learning out there, which is fine, but honestly, if you get someone like Jonathan, or somebody that has former law enforcement, or somebody that has experience in this area, and you do some interactive training where they're asking questions just like you guys are and throwing out ideas and suggestions just like you're doing, that may be something that somebody else in the room didn't think of, or they start to recognize this as something that's more plausible. Like someone said earlier, a lot of organizations just think it can't happen here, and they don't like to think about it. But if you think about it in this way, in that if it were to happen, what would I do? It takes a little bit of the fear out of it. It's still obviously a very scary concept, but it takes some of the, I don't know what would happen. I had an employer respond to me once and said, well, we only have one entrance and one exit, so if that happens, we're screwed. And I was like, that's not even remotely true. So I sent her a whole bunch of recommendations, and she was really surprised that she hadn't thought of that she'd really just thought of it as a no-win situation. Dustin, yes, I will. If you, I'll give everyone my email address at the end of the presentation so that you can email me, and I'll send you a copy of the slides.
So here's some things that we consider positive things to help out your organization, and things that we can help with as well. So risk assessments. Remember I was talking about risk assessments before? Huge. Why do I say risk assessments? Because it helps identify where the vulnerabilities are. Whether or not you're going to take action, just knowing that that is a vulnerability will help you set up a nice plan, which is also something that you can get help with. Setting up a plan to train and to create that culture. Just have something in writing to help people understand what the policy is from the executives on this.
And it's also better to have a third party. And again, you can use us, you can use anyone that's out there. We tend to recognize and try to implement, or give you recommendations to implement, things that are very low cost and or free. Yeah. That's really our focus. Our focus is more around things that your organization would be likely to do. Tony mentioned a couple of things about it being too expensive. That's true, but again, if the organization really buys into this idea, it typically has to come from somebody outside the organization, because inside it's really, it's just fear, and it's just this one person that is afraid that this might happen. But if it's someone from outside the organization that can talk statistically about this and give reasonable measures to take in order to create more security, or really point out vulnerabilities that even if you work there every day, you may or may not notice because you're so familiar with the facility and you're familiar with, you know, the culture there and the organization. You may not see some of the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and take that suggestion today from one of our participants today, the hotkeys on the keyboard to send out an alert. That's something that you don't think about that much. But in retrospect, that's something that's essentially free. If you have somebody who is a salaried employee working on that for 3 hours in one day, that's essentially free for your organization, but has helped your organization out. So that's a lot of the stuff we focus on. Moving into drills, there's just muscle memory, right? We talk about having the training for management and putting together plans. Well, you need to also drill that plan if you can. And sometimes the organizations don't want to drill it, they don't want to take that time out of the day, but having people walk through what is expected and what should happen is, in some cases, not only fun for people, but it's also a very good thing to help with that muscle memory so that when something does happen, they are ready. They know how to respond. I know that everybody says, oh my gosh, I've done 1 million fire drills, but guess what? If a fire actually happened, are you ready to, you know, take on a fire and be able to get out of the building? Think about an active shooter drill the same exact way. Now, situational awareness training. So being able to perceive what's going on in your surroundings. And that situational awareness is knowing the little, or being able to see those little clues and those little things, or hear the little thing that sounds unfamiliar and be able to respond to that and react to that. You're going to say something?
No, just with drills. I know when we first rolled out this program, when I first took over this program, the very first thing I did was take my employees and walk them through our facility. Because honestly, from the first day you start in an organization, and again, it depends on your office space, but if it's a larger facility or if you're on just one floor of the building, you probably don't walk around and go in different directions and take different exits and try different doors. So the very first thing when it comes to, you know, drills don't have to be, you know, these crazy events or these crazy things that go on. It could really just literally be bringing someone in that walks through your building with your employees and says, okay, here's a good hiding place, this is why. Here's something you can use to barricade. Here's the, you know, a better exit. You need to have 2 exits. We did a full-on drill once, and unfortunately everyone tried to use the same exit. There was a call center area, and they all tried to go out the same exit. And, you know, obviously you know what happens. They weren't trained to do that. They were trained to split up and go in different directions, but they didn't. And they all just kind of like got blocked at that one door. I mean, you think about it, you know, 50 people going out one door, it's going to take a long time. You're a sitting duck. Yeah. So people don't recognize those things. They just think, oh, I'd go out that door. Well, think about how many other people are going out that door. And if that way was blocked, or say the active shooter was on that side, you need to know another exit. You need to know a different way, or you need to know the hiding places that are in different directions. If they're coming from one direction, you need to know if you go right, if you go left, if you go north, if you go south. You need to know what is along that way and really have a good feel for the layout of that building. And that should become second nature to you. If you go to a movie theater, you should know where the exits are. If you go to a shopping mall, you should know where the exits are. So when we talk about situational awareness training, those are, you know, we teach some very simple techniques, but you know, it seems like they're simple, but a lot of people don't think about it because they just go through their day. A lot of times we stare at our cell phone. You know, we're doing multiple things while we're in very unfamiliar areas, and that's the thing that could be the difference between life and death, is really just knowing your facility or knowing your surrounding areas wherever you are. James says, as a 10-year Navy veteran, we ran drills constantly so that we could perform tasks in our sleep. Yeah, Jonathan will sit here and tell you the same thing. I mean, that's... Yep. You do it over and over and over again. Tony, I was at my accounts office a few years ago when a worker's husband came by with a gun. We locked down and moved to the back. Tony, that's really scary. But I was surprised that I was shaking and frozen, really unable to think. Completely unlike my personality. Absolutely.
And we talk about situational awareness. We talk about training for that exact reason. Because when people don't know what to do, unfortunately, it's human nature. It's the fight, flight, or freeze, right? Mm-hmm. So your body's going to go into 3 things. We used to think it was just fight or flight, but in the reality it's 3 things. You're either going to fight back, you're going to flee the situation, or you're going to freeze. And a lot of times, people who are untrained and unprepared end up freezing, and that's when you get hurt, Okay, I'm glad that in that case you didn't get hurt, and I'm not saying that it would have worked out any other way, but we want people to be trained for that exact reason. We don't want people to freeze.
But she has a really good point, too, is that you don't necessarily know how you would react until you get into that situation. And that's what drills are for. We did a drill at one organization, and there was a gentleman who literally just stood there when Jonathan came through with a fake gun, obviously, and he knew that the drill was coming, not what time it was going to start, but he thought he was mentally prepared until someone came through with a gun, and even after he knew that he was shot, he literally just stood there frozen and stared at us. And afterwards, he was like, I had no idea. I thought I was ready. I thought this was no big deal. But that's when you start to mentally prepare yourself, and there are a lot of exercises you can do to do that. But again, it goes back to culture. Like Jonathan said, you have to talk about it more often. It has to be something that in your mind you finally recognize that it's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when these days. I mean, the statistics show, yes, maybe you're less likely, but if you look at all the statistics out there, people are more concerned about skydiving than they are driving in a car, but you're more likely to be injured in a car accident. Yeah. We just don't like to think about it. We like to always think that we're safe.
Exactly.
But until you take the steps and get more comfortable with the idea that you may or may not be safe in a given again, shopping mall, movie theater, workplace.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because this training transcends just work. You can use this out in real life, You can use it at home. You can use it at the shopping mall, the theater. Talk to your friends and family about this.
Absolutely.
That's what we give these webinars. This is just 1 hour of information you can bring back and talk to your friends, your family, and help someone out. Please, if you have questions, reach out to us. We're here to help. We're here to answer your questions. And we just want to be the person who helps you.
Want to be a good resource, absolutely. Funny story, I was assisting with a yoga teacher training because I'm also a trained yoga instructor. And we were given a task to just take something that had nothing to do with yoga and present it as if we were teaching, just practicing the art of teaching. And I taught them a very brief part of situational awareness. And it was really funny to see how their eyes lit up. Like I did an exercise and had them all turn around. And we were in a park by the beach. And I'm all turned around. And then I had them tell me what the gentleman behind me was doing, what he was wearing, where he was. And half of them were like, wow, I didn't even notice he was there. The other half got one part, but not the other part. And that's really, those kinds of things you can teach your kids. I mean, you can teach a 10-year-old to know when somebody looks like they're acting strange, or they're, sweating, or red-faced, or maybe wearing the wrong clothing. There's a gentleman that goes to a cafe right near our office every day, and he wears a trench coat. And I always wonder, what is he thinking? Because we're in Southern California and it's summer. But B, doesn't he know that that makes people uncomfortable? Clearly he's not dangerous, but those are some things that you can teach your kids, your family members, that they never even think about. They never even thought about knowing, what someone was doing, unless it's a clear threat. Like if you're an ATM and there's someone that doesn't look like they're clean, or they don't look like they're having a really good day near you, obviously your flags go up. But in general, even when you're just walking down the street, you need to be aware of that as well. So it's a mindset. It's a training. It's something that you have to talk about again and again. It's not a very simple, just watch a video or just look even at this slideshow. We're going to send out a recording of this webinar as well. And yes, Maria, I can email you the presentation. Just email me. I'm going to put my email on the next slide. Just email me directly and I'll send it back to you.
You can even go to the website and there is a drop down that will bring you to previous videos and previous webinars. So if this is your first time joining us, well, welcome. But also go there and check out other previous ones. We've done ones in the past that talk about more than self-defense, but talk about situational awareness. They go in depth on the run, hide, fight.
Emergency response planning.
Emergency response planning. There's tons of resources available for you.
Absolutely. And then think about how this could impact your organization, even on a smaller scale, or even if you present it to your decision makers or your employees as workplace violence as opposed to active shooter. Sometimes it's just a matter of language. People know that workplace violence, that's been an issue for a long time. It's injury and illness prevention, they cover workplace violence. In the OSHA requirements, you have to do an hour of injury and illness prevention every year, according to OSHA standards. So you could incorporate that as your injury and illness prevention hour. We can talk about this and remove the active shooter term and just talk about workplace violence.
And the reality is it's changing every single year. Sometimes it's more active shooter, sometimes it's more active stabbings, or there's
or driving cars into crowds
people like we've seen lately. There's multiple things, and it changes over the years, but it's still an important topic no matter how you put it.
And again, it comes back to situational awareness and self-defense techniques, regardless of the situation that you're in. And that's something that can be taught. It just has to be practiced. So that's what we're here for. We are happy to help. Again, just email me at the address there above. And if you have any questions or any particular concerns, if I don't have the answer for you, I'll get the answer from Jonathan for you as well. We're just literally here to support. Our number one goal and our number one priority is your safety. And it's still astounding to me how our community has been so slow to grasp the fact that this is an everyday reality. So that's really my challenge, and my number one goal is to get awareness out there, get resources out there, and then maybe support you in your efforts and come out and train your employees and get in front of them and give them some of the real life information. In a lot of our trainings, we talk a lot about specific situations and walk them through how this really did happen, and people did survive, and they did do these things that we're talking about, and they survived, and it had a positive outcome. So, the reality of that is a little, it's important. I mean, it's crucial to people really understanding that, and then training and practicing and all of the other things that go in, mostly prevention, but also practicing response.
Exactly.
So thank you, everyone. This was probably the most interactive group we've ever had. I greatly appreciate all of your questions. Again, reach out individually to me, and I will be happy to help and provide you with the slides if you'd like. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon, and stay safe.
Stay safe, yes.
Most importantly. Thank you, Daisy. Us too.